Welcome to the Best Little Town Podcast, your go-to source for everything happening in the town of Bedford's local government. Whether it's new initiatives or important decisions shaping our town's future, you'll hear it right here. This podcast is dedicated to keeping our residents informed and engaged.
Greetings and welcome to the Best Little Town Podcast, brought to you by the town of Bedford in conjunction with our partners at Media Squatch. My name is Bart Warner. I'm privileged to serve as the town manager of this community, and this podcast is an effort to provide greater information to all our businesses, residents, customers, and interested parties about the functions of your town government. This is a recap of the most recent town council meeting. We're recording this on Monday, February 23rd, which is a little unusual. I was in Stanton last week from Wednesday through Friday at the Virginia Local Government Management Association meeting, which was a worthwhile endeavor. I actually have about 2 pages of notes I've got to type up and report back to council and my colleagues about some ideas and recommendations and some things I learned there. Of course, while I was there, I was still conducting town business by email and keeping track of accounts payable, but fortunately it precluded me from joining you the day after the council meeting, which took place last week on Tuesday, February 17th. So for those of you who listen to the podcast and on a regular basis, I apologize for that delay, but that's the explanation. And without further ado, we will jump right into what transpired last Tuesday in the municipal building at 215 East Main Street, beginning at 7 p.m. First was the approval of minutes from the previous meeting, which was unanimously dispatched by town council. Next was the report of town manager. The one thing I specifically noted that the recent weather and associated electric usage and also the power supply cost is resulting in extremely high bills across the board. A lot of you are starting to see those in your mailboxes at home. They're enormously large and not pleasant, and frankly, nobody, including town council, is happy about it. In fact, the town just received a monthly bill for $3.5 million, which is the highest one that anybody associated with the town has experienced to date. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in response to some comments that were made, and frankly, we'll move into that part of the agenda. The next item is appearances before council. That's when folks are allowed to sign up to speak about any topic that is near and dear to their heart personally. The first speaker was Mr. Dave Metz, who's a local pastor. He offered prayer for the community and council and thanked council for their service to the community. His comments also centered around the scripture of James chapter 4, verse 10. The next speaker was Miss Ann DeLong. She shared her concerns and those of the community about the electric bills, shared her view that there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation floating around in the community, and suggested that we hold some kind of public town hall working session to go over the bills from a customer perspective, particularly focusing on concerns such as usage and billing. She noted that there have been 3 or 4 bills in the General Assembly dealing with electric issues at the state level. Also noted that some utilities offer discount programs for weatherization. And she also brought up the fact that a lot of people have solar panels on their properties and questioned the town's net metering policy. The town's current practice is if you have solar power and you generate more than you need and you put that power back into the grid, that does reduce your load and does benefit us overall by reducing the power that we then have to purchase on everyone's behalf. Unfortunately, we do not pay for that surplus power, and the reason is that that payment has to come from somewhere, and given our system and the fact that we're not a for-profit organization or an investor-owned utility with a return on that investment, that means that payment would essentially come from the entire customer base. So it's a matter of we're obligated to purchase power in advance in many cases, to secure power contracts at a certain rate. But then once that power is actually used, we pay for it later based on the meter that's applied to our connection point. So again, the town is obligated to provide a minimum level of power to all its customers. If you have a way to minimize that, that's good for you. It's good overall, but we don't see an immediate benefit. The next speaker was Mr. Jay Kumar, who noted that he has been in the motel business for 20 years. He shared his observation that a lot of people are passing by town and not staying. Apparently, 85% of his customers or perhaps hotel customers in the area are checking in for one night only. He expressed his concerns about the appearance of empty buildings downtown and suggested that there's not a lot of return on investment for those property owners, and we should come up with some idea to abate that. He stated that he owns 6 acres on Highway 460, just west of town, and he's been attempting to get sewer service there and has not been successful. He noted that the item of new business, we're dealing with a vacant property registry, is kind of a bad sign economically. He noted that he moved to Bedford from New York back in 2007. He suggested that we undertake better efforts to monetize the appeal of assets such as the Peaks of Otter and Smith Mountain Lake. And he stated that he was personally willing to engage owners of multiple properties himself. Next to speak was Ms. Leslie Mahaffey, who stated she had attended the Board of Supervisors meeting the previous week, where our town public works department had been commended by the county government for their snow removal efforts, so she passed along that compliment. She also noted the Flora apartments, which are now being occupied, and there is now actually a disc golf basket in the front yard of that property, which she recognized as a good thing. Leslie then spoke to her professional role as the manager of the Bedford County Museum. She says she's been affiliated with the museum for 30 years. The museum has been here for 93 years. It interprets Bedford history from 1754 to the present. She noted that she did review the 5-year strategic plan published by the town and was concerned that there was no specific mention of the museum itself under the tourism and promotion section. She stated that you are missing a gem if you have not visited there. I agree and would like to encourage folks to stop by if you have a moment to visit the Bedford County Museum right next door to the municipal building. It operates on funding provided from the Bedford County through a grant and also donations. She also noted that the museum has not been specifically addressed by the town's Economic Development Authority. She then raised a concern on behalf of neighbors along Peak Street that there are some no parking signs on the northbound lanes that are fading somewhat and need to be addressed. And then she also shared her personal concerns about the recent electric bills, stated that the church she attends recently saw an increase of 300% in their bill over the last 3 months. There were no other people to appear before council, so we moved right along to council comments. We began with Councilman Stacy Haley, who thanked all those who were physically present. Also thanked the town departments for their work in response to the winter weather. Council Todd Foreman said he did not have much to add and echoed Mr. Haley's comments. Councilman Jay Ippolito likewise thanked the folks who were physically present. He also noted that Rushi Wooldridge, a longtime fixture in the community who has been a crossing guard at schools, will be retiring soon. And he also noted the recent passing of Ann Wood, who was a prominent citizen in town who worked for People's Furniture for many years and was a founding member of the Keep Bedford Beautiful Commission. Just noted Ann's commitment to the town and how much the community was blessed by her efforts, and we all certainly echo that sentiment and extend our condolences to Christy Milton and the rest of her family that survived. Likewise, Councilman Ippolito thank those who spoke during the appearances before council. Vice Mayor Updike, again, thanked everyone for coming. We then moved on to Councilman Dwight Evans, who, in addition to thanking folks for coming physically, noted that the council does listen to the comments they received, and he also recognized those who were watching live on the YouTube live stream and online and provide their feedback. Next was Councilman Dave Foster, who, again, thanked those who were physically present, recognized the efforts of town staff during the recent winter weather events. He also recognized his neighbor, Rusty Mansell. We had an issue the weekend before last with a tractor trailer that drove up Grove Street from the railroad tracks and attempted to make a right turn onto Longwood Avenue, despite the fact that there's clearly marked signage at the intersection of Jackson Street and Grove indicating that trucks are not allowed. In this case, the truck actually struck a power pole on Longwood and caused significant damage there, basically totaled the pole, and that had to be replaced by the electric department pretty quickly, and would have continued on if Mr. Mansell had not flagged them down until such time as the police department could intervene. He also noted that he would appreciate it if people would educate themselves about the discussion of redistricting for the congressional districts. There is a constitutional amendment that is likely headed towards a referendum, and he did read some of the language of that proposed amendment. Councilman Foster stated that he certainly understands the concerns about electric costs. He went on to provide some more comments and observations from his perspective. We recently received a document from NERC, which is a Northeastern Reliability Coalition, regarding the reliability projection of the electric grid, indicating that there are significant challenges that are coming at us that, frankly, are not being addressed. The demand in the grid managed by PJM is growing at its fastest rate in years. However, we are not replacing the generation in accordance with that demand. The projected need is from PJM is expected to go from 56 gigawatts to 210 gigawatts by 2035. Demand is growing, and also there is higher risk in terms of the existing generation that is providing our electricity. He noted that at his house, he compared his bills from January 2025 to January 2026 and noted a 63.9% increase year over year just at his home. Noted that the issue with the electric costs, and most of this goes back to the cost involved in just providing the electricity that we deliver for your usage, hurts everyone, and it's a nationwide issue. The roots of that go back to some national policy relating to generating facilities. There was a concerted effort to move away from fossil fuel generated electricity. That took effect about 10 or 15 years ago. A lot of coal-fired plants, oil plants, and natural gas facilities also have been shuttered as a matter of policy. Meanwhile, demand continues to grow, and that is resulting in increased prices and reduced reliability. I will say that in the most recent event last month, where we had significantly low temperatures, the demand for that power was met by the existing coal, oil, and natural gas facilities. The solar panels didn't do much when they were covered by snow, and our renewables, such as our hydro plant, weren't helpful because the channel of the river was frozen. The bulk of the power that we ended up receiving to keep us warm was generated by fossil fuels, and that was paid for at a premium cost because, again, there aren't as many of those facilities and there is increased demand. I forgot to mention Mr. Jay Kumar, as he exited the podium, noted his concerns about the power costs, and he asked a question that I frankly was out of order, but tried to answer. And I advised him then, and you'll catch it if you watch the video, that hopefully we will not see a weather event like we had in February, the beginning of February, the end of January, where we had single-digit temperatures for an extended period of time, which increased usage, again, of these resources that are already scarce and expensive. However, the portion of the bill that we are trying to be more transparent about, that involves simply getting the power to the customers before they ever use it, that price is not likely to go down anytime soon, and that is really a matter of supply and demand as well as generation policy. Finally, Mayor C.G. Stanley shared his compliments to staff for our response to the weather events of last month. He also commented on the loss of Ann Woods and the pending retirement of Rushi Wooldridge. The next item of business was a report of council committees. There were none. There were also no revisions to the agenda. We had no public hearings. We had one item on the consent agenda, which was acceptance of the single audit report for fiscal year 2025. In accordance with the Single Audit Act and the OMB uniform guidance, the town of Bedford is required to undergo an annual audit of its federal award expenditures because the town expended more than $750,000 in federal funds during the fiscal year. The report is a supplement to the annual comprehensive financial report and focuses specifically on internal controls and compliance related to federal programs. The audit for fiscal year 2025 was completed by Brown Edwards & Company, LLC. The report is typically associated with the financial report, but was delayed this year due to a delay in the release of guidance from the federal government. The primary objective of the report is to describe the scope of testing of internal control and compliance and the result of that testing. The results of the audit are included in the schedule of findings and question cost, with the only finding comment relating to public safety and parks expenditures that exceeded the final revised budget of the town. No instances of noncompliance, deficiencies, or material weaknesses were reported. On a motion made by Vice Mayor Updike and seconded by Councilman Stacey Haley, Council unanimously voted to approve and accept the fiscal year 2025 single audit report as presented and to authorize its submission to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. Next, we moved into new business. We only had one item on the agenda last Tuesday, and that was a discussion of the vacant building registry that is included as part of the Downtown Action Strategy. Staff has been working to implement the provisions of the Downtown Action Strategy, which was approved by Council on January 6th. One of the policy and administration recommendations of the strategy is adoption of a vacant building registration ordinance. In cooperation with the town attorney, staff has developed a formal draft of such an ordinance, which was circulated to council prior to the meeting, and last night council was requested to discuss the terms and provisions of the proposed ordinance as drafted. The most significant aspect of this is basically what it says, a list of vacant properties that have been empty or derelict or blighted for a specific period of time, in most cases 12 months. The initial registration fee to list and identify those buildings is $100 per property. Failure to register carries an additional penalty of $200, and a failure to register a property that is in a conservation or rehabilitation district or has determined to be spot blight carries an additional penalty of $400. As you might imagine, there was some very robust discussion about the rationale behind this and the process for it. Questions related to the publication of the registry. Town Attorney Mike Lockaby fielded most of the questions, noted that it would be subject to the requirements of the Freedom of Information Act, but it certainly could be published proactively by the town. There were questions about exemptions for property owners who are attempting to address certain issues on their property and who are actively maintaining those. And possible exemptions from the policy would be for properties that had an active building permit or that there were some legal proceedings that might be affecting the transfer of property, such as there being probate activity or wills that may have applicability. There was also the question of whether listing on the registry would affect the ability of property owners to get insurance. Council instructed staff to do some research from other communities that have adopted such an ordinance to see how that's been handled. There was also a question of how owners might be negatively impacted if they were trying to obtain bank loans or financing to fix problems in vacant buildings or to do some extra work. Again, council directed staff to research the communities that have this to see how that's being handled. Then there was a question of the applicability of the ordinance itself, whether it would be town-wide or related to a specific area. Mr. Lockaby noted that it's drafted to apply throughout the town, although if council wanted to clarify that and direct it to a specific district or area or zoning classification, that would be possible. There was also the question of whether it would apply to residential versus commercial property, and the answer was that it is intended to apply to all uses regardless of their zoning categorization or status. Councilman Dave Foster specifically spoke up and expressed his concerns about derelict property and blight. Also said that there's probably a legal definition related to utilities which would apply. The connection to utilities might be a determining factor in considerations of whether properties are blighted. There was also a question of who would determine if properties were blighted, and staff reported that this would be primarily accomplished by regular inspections from code enforcement personnel who would then be in direct contact with property owners who may be affected. Councilman Foster and Councilman Foreman shared their observation that this actually might impact more residential properties than downtown commercial properties. And again, Mr. Lockaby, the town attorney, reminded folks that the town could restrict it to one area if they wanted to, but they would need to be very specific. There then arose some discussion about the process involved. Council ultimately directed staff to get answers to the questions that have been raised and to come back. Mr. Brian Reynolds, who was present and identified himself as a property owner downtown, asked what was being done by the town to bring people in. Mayor Stanley responded in part to that question and also described some of his personal observations about the Bedford market and some specific concerns related to the local economy. Again, there was another discussion about the process for review and possible adoption. Ultimately, a majority of council indicated that they prefer to have a public hearing on the ordinance when it is ready to be presented in a final form. That was presented in the form of a motion by Councilman Stacey Haley, seconded by Councilman Jay Ippolito. All members present voted in favor unanimously. And so once we get some of these questions answered and develop some language dealing with possible exemptions or contingencies, this will appear on a future council agenda. That completed the new business. The only other item taken up Tuesday night last week was a closed session dealing with personnel. I will tell you that was my annual review by council. We discussed my performance and how I can better do my job to serve the directives of council and carry out my tasks. Once that was completed, we came out of closed session and the meeting was adjourned without further action. Again, just to remind folks, the council meets on the first and third Tuesdays of every month when there is an agenda at 7 p.m., 215 East Main Street, upstairs in the municipal building. We love having people join us in person. If you can't make it out, we do live stream the meetings. We also keep a video recording of the meetings on YouTube. If you go to youtube.com and search for Town of Bedford, Virginia, you will see all the meetings that we have available there. Minutes, once approved by council, are posted to the website at www.bedfordva.gov. And then, of course, there is this podcast, which is an effort to provide a further recap and maybe a deeper dive into the items that are discussed. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to us directly. The municipal building is open on Mondays through Fridays from 8:30 a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. The main number there is 540-587-6001. If you want to reach out to me directly by email, that is always a good thing, and I would appreciate that. My email address is bwarner@bedfordva.gov. Again, I want to thank you very much for your time and attention in joining me for this broadcast, and for your interest in the town, and for all the things that you do to contribute to our status as the world's best little town. As we say, that's sometimes a boast, sometimes a statement of aspiration, but it's always the goal that we have in mind. The next regularly scheduled council meeting will take place Tuesday, March 3rd. Again, we hope you can join us there, but if you can't, I will join you immediately thereafter as soon as I can to provide this recount. Until that time, I hope everyone enjoys good health, comfort, and that we see the increasing presence of spring in our lives all around. Thanks again for joining us.